The EICO 360 TV FM sweep generator is a very unusual piece of equipment. And it's very unusual that this model that I have here says that it's expressly for instructional and or experimental purposes. So could it be that this was used in instructional places? That's where I got it from. A teacher who taught in an instructional vocational school, and has some very strange things. Got a tube with two caps on it on the top, and it's got this thing that looks a lot like a speaker. Well, it is a speaker, and it's actually a speaker with a diaphragm that's a coil. And if you look at the schematic, you'll see that they actually do have a thing showing a speaker and a coil, and that is to make this particular piece of equipment generate the sweeping function. And there's the information about the strange tube with the two caps on it. And you can look at the equipment dial here. It's got a phasing control, so that when you use it as a sweeper, the outputs there, the 60 cycle output that it says down there, can be used to XY sweep the scope. It'll be the horizontal axis. It's got a place for a crystal marker function, and it's got the output level control, the output RF output, and then the sweep width from 0 to 30 megahertz of sweep, and a very unusual dial, which we will explain in a moment. What we're looking at right now is the EICO 360 phasing control. The bottom trace is the phasing control, and I've got the scope triggered to that, and you can see that the line frequency on top is it does change. So there is a phase change. Unfortunately, and it says so in the book, when you change the phase, it also changes the amplitude. It's a very inexpensive circuit that they had in there, but you can see that the phase shift does work. The 360 in the XY mode can make some very strange looking patterns. I can adjust the phase, and it makes the pattern looks like it's twisting a little bit. And then, of course, as we said, it changes the amplitude, so that phase control does that. And some very strange things that we see when we sweep different frequencies. Again, this is showing the XY pattern when you adjust the phasing control, and they say that they want that to, instead of looking like two things overlapping, that they be one whole. I don't know that it really looks quite that way. The EICO 360 front panel is kind of confusing. There are two oscillators, and one oscillator is fixed at 114 megahertz, and then there's oscillator number 2, which is from 54 to 114. And if you look over on the right hand side, you'll see the number 2 at the end of that outer band that shows that it goes from 55 to approximately 114 megahertz. Now, when you have two signal sources and you mix them, you get the sums and the differences and harmonics of the sums and differences and the fundamentals, and it really gets kind of confusing. However, you'll see that the next dial in is oscillator 1 minus oscillator 2. So since oscillator number 2 ends at 114, all the way over on the right side, you're basically 0 megahertz. And it increases. You see 5, 10, 15, all the way up to 60 megahertz. because if you subtract 114 minus 54, you'll get 60 megahertz. And you'll see the TV channels listed in there. And you notice that there's a channel 1 and there's a channel 2. The next band is the second harmonic of that, so it is 2 times 1 minus 2, and you see the first marking is 10, 20, 30, all the way up to 120. And that one, the channels are marked there again, channels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the FM band. And finally, the last band, the other one goes the other way around. It goes from 170 to 255, or as you see, 168 to 228. That's 1 plus 2. Instead of subtracting the 2, you take the sum, and that's all the frequencies that are when you add the 2 together. And that covers channels 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And the very last red band in the middle, that is just an arbitrary 0 to 100 mark thing if you wanted to log that. And you see the sweep width controls oscillator number 1, so you can the whole thing can be swept over a range of 0, 5, 10, 20, all the way up to 30 megahertz of sweeping for the purposes of seeing how flat an IF is. In the old days of adjustable networks and TVs. Since the EICO 360 has 2 oscillators in it, they get mixed and they produce beats which are intentional. And if you turn on the sweep, it just loses lock because it's shifting frequency all over. And here I'm tuning the frequency knob little by little, and you can see that the 2 oscillators beat one against the other to produce various different phasings and beats. And actually I am tuning to the higher frequency, and you can see that those beats get higher and higher. They get spaced smaller and smaller, closer together. And of course, with all the beating of these frequencies, the oscilloscope is triggered onto one frequency, and anything that's a multiple of that or submultiple, you will see patterns that look stationary, different frequencies, different number of interference patterns on the screen at a time.